1789, the fall of the Bastille prison heralded the end of an era and the beginning of a new one. The slogans of equality, liberty, and fraternity shook Europe. But what if the people hadn't revolted on that famous day? Here we embark on an imaginative journey to a world where the French Revolution never happened. With the revolution not occurring, the Kingdom of France continued to be ruled by absolute monarchy. Louis XVI and his successors remained on the throne. Nobles and clergy retained their privileges, while the vast majority of the population continued to live under economic hardship and political oppression. As the ideas of nationalism and republicanism spread by the revolution were suppressed, other monarchies in Europe also remained more secure. Empires such as Spain, Austria, Prussia, and Russia, less worried about popular uprisings, maintained their authority. The rise of a figure like Napoleon Bonaparte was also prevented, as the French army was not reshaped by revolutionary ideals. The Napoleonic Wars that swept across Europe did not occur. This led to a completely different political map of the 19th century. The Industrial Revolution slowed down in Europe. Without the social and economic changes brought about by the revolution, the remnants of the feudal system and aristocratic privileges limited the rise of the bourgeoisie and economic innovation. Although Enlightenment ideas continued to spread, their impact remained more limited. Without the radical rhetoric and actions of the revolution, ideas such as equality, human rights, and democracy were more easily controlled by monarchical regimes. The future of the United States took a different shape. Without French support, the American Revolutionary War was more challenging. This fundamentally affected the balance of power in North America. Colonialism became even more entrenched in the 19th century. Monarchies like Spain and Portugal, not weakened by revolution, made greater efforts to retain their colonies, while powers like Britain faced fewer rivals. Social changes progressed more slowly. Nobility titles and class distinctions retained their importance, and social mobility remained limited. The idea of popular participation in government remained a marginal thought for a long time. Although scientific advancements occurred, funding and focus were different. Monarchies prioritized military and technological developments, while fields like social sciences and human rights received less support. Throughout the 19th century, Europe continued to be governed by a system based on different alliances and balances of power. While rivalry between the great powers persisted, the ideological divisions triggered by the revolution did not occur. Although literature and art contained social criticism due to limitations on freedom of expression, these criticisms were more indirect and symbolic. Works openly targeting the monarchy were banned. By the 20th century, Europe had largely retained its monarchical structure. However, increasing economic inequality and popular expectations led to different types of uprisings or reform movements. Instead of a revolution, more controlled and gradual changes occurred. Independence movements in the colonies followed a different course. Without the inspiring effect of the revolution, colonial peoples remained subject to metropolitan powers for longer, or their struggles for independence were shaped by different ideologies. Technological advancements focused on improving the lifestyles of the aristocracy and increasing military power. Inventions and innovations aimed at improving the general welfare of the population were less of a priority. International relations continued to be based on traditional power balances and dynastic interests, rather than ideological competition. Wars still occurred, but their causes and consequences were different. Art movements developed in a different direction. Although movements like neoclassicism and romanticism emerged, the emotional intensity and social criticism brought about by the revolution were reflected differently in art. Music and theatre continued to cater primarily to aristocratic tastes. Elements of folk culture and revolutionary songs saw less development. Art largely remained under the patronage of the court and noble circles. Philosophy still encouraged free thought, but its impact on the political and social sphere was more indirect and long-term. Philosophers had to adopt a more cautious relationship with monarchical regimes. In conclusion, the non-occurrence of the French Revolution led to profound and lasting changes in the shaping of the modern world. Monarchies continued to reign, and concepts like nationalism and democracy developed much more slowly. However, the course of history is always unpredictable. Perhaps instead of the French Revolution, a different popular movement with similar consequences emerged at another time, in another place. History is full of what-if questions, and that is what makes it infinitely fascinating.